Hey everybody, welcome back to another little episode. Today I'm going to discuss romantic comedies. Not something probably you've talked about by men, which is surprising, but still. Again, I'm gonna give you a list and give you my thoughts on these things. With romantic comedies, to me, what actually makes a romantic comedy good is that it'll have a mix of the romance and the comedy equally, to where the movie isn't too far one way or too far the other, though it can lean a little bit one way or the other. Um, One movie I will not consider a romantic comedy, no matter what, is Titanic, and that is because it was more about the romance between two people rather than the idea of any a bit of comedy that was there in it. The only bit of comedy you really got out of that film was when they did the little dance scene at the bottom of the boat where she's steps up, where she gets on the table and dances. That's it. The rest of it is pretty much just period style idealism and focusing on the love between two people rather than any moments of happiness that could have been considered comedy in any way. But anyways, on to romantic comedies themselves. Another thing about them that I found interesting, the earliest romantic comedy was actually during the silent film era, 1912 film called All for a Girl by Frederick A. Thompson. And I find this interesting because the silent film era was known as that because you didn't have actual speaking parts in it. At best, you would get like little cards that flash after certain scenes that tell you what they're saying. So, how they managed to make that work and have the music work with it, that these viewers could actually enjoy, is surprising to me. Another thing, a lot of famous stars tended to act in some type of romantic comedy at some point in their career. Julia Roberts is one of the best known actresses for doing those type of movies. And Sandra Bullock, Marilyn Monroe, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is actually considered a romantic comedy. And one scene she's done where she performed a song called Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend was actually had homages. Has actually had homages done to it by Madonna, Beyonce, Nicole Kidman, Christina Aguilera, among others. For you Full House and Fuller House fans, Candace Cameron was actually, the one that plays DJ Tanner on those shows, was actually in a romantic comedy as a kid. But during the time that around the time Full House was started shooting, the movie was called Some Kind of Wonderful. She was a minor part in it, but she was actually kind of fun. But she was actually funny in the movie. Ali Sheedy's another one. She was a member of a group that was known as the Brat Pack, which included Emilio Estevez, Molly Ringwald. Take St. Elmo's Fire and The Breakfast Club, and you've pretty much got the general idea of who was considered to be in this, though not necessarily all of them. And some of them that weren't in those films were considered part of the group. Ali Sheedy did the Short Circuit movies, which I consider to be a romantic comedy because of the way they're done, despite the story isn't focused on the romance in that one as much. But another movie she did, The Breakfast Club, as I stated earlier, she was the one known as the crazy or basket case girl in the movie. And as I've said, Sandra Bullock's done them, and sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied here. And Julia Roberts has done a lot of them. Pretty Woman is considered a big romantic comedy. Runaway Bride. You can pretty much find, like I said, you can pretty much find almost any famous actress or actor and find them in a romantic comedy at some point in their career, even if it's not one that was done where they were the main star but had a small bit part or even a cameo in it. Okay. Now, this video is going to end up being shorter than I thought it was going to be, actually. I'd like to set up my choice of films, of rom-com, romantic comedies, however you want to say it, type films for my choices. This list originally started out at 10, but the more I thought about it, the more I considered these films to be important to them, even though they weren't my top 10 in it. So I extended the list this time to become a top 13. Number 13 on the list, and probably one that was really well known, is The Notebook from 2004. Rachel McAdams, Ryan Gosling, is a couple that fall in love in the 40s. One thing I enjoyed about this film is that James Garner's in it as an elderly man telling the story of these two, and it's well done. This one, it focused more on the romance than it did on the comedy, which is why I initially didn't want to include it in the list, but then I thought about it, and as much as I enjoyed it, a lot of it was actually the comical parts in the movie that made me enjoy it. Okay, number 12, Trojan War from 1997, starring Will Friedle, for you Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World fans, and others would remember him from Disney's Kim Possible as the voice of Ron Stoppable. And the lead actress in this movie is Jennifer Love Hewitt, from TV show Ghost Whisperer, one season of Criminal Minds. But something a lot of people probably don't remember is that Jennifer Love Hewitt actually had a guest role on Boy Meets World, where she played a parody of her own name, and and the episode itself was a horror type parody. And I highly recommend that episode because the idea behind it actually is actually well explained with the way the story goes about it. The third person in this movie that comes up that a lot of people forget about is Marley Shelton, who was a great actress, and the movie I remember her for that came after this is that she played the cheerleader in the movie Sugar and Spice, where a group of them decide to rob a bank when her character becomes pregnant in order to help give the unborn baby a future. And another guest spot that takes place in this movie, Anthony Michael Hall and Lee Majors are both in this movie in their own little spots, and it actually works really well. This movie is named Trojan War because in the movie the guy's actually going about looking for protection to be with this girl played by Marley Shelton, who he thinks he's in love with. And throughout the movie, he comes to realize he's going through all this to get this condom, but in the end ends up realizing who he's really in love with and learning in his own way about life and how it always has a sense of humor and meaning to it in some way. even if we don't get it at the time it's taking place. Danny Masterson, from a few seasons, from at least one season of The Ranch, I know for a fact. Sorry, wasn't a big fan of that show. And from that 70s show is Hyde. And the voice of Max from Goofy Movie and Extremely Goofy Movie, who was also, who the actor actually played the friend of Will Friedle's character on Boy Meets World for 1 or 2 seasons, and was also on another ABC series known as Step by Step, where he played the friend to one of the main characters in the show, before becoming the love interest to the sister of one of the characters in it. Okay, number 11, Heartbreakers, from somewhere in the early 2000s, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sigourney Weaver, and Ray Liotta. In this one, Jennifer Love Hewitt and Sigourney Weaver play a mother-daughter con team that work up this idea to where they marry these men and then find a way to get them divorced by getting them to have an affair of some type and getting them caught in the act, which leads to these big settlements for them. And then they just repeat the process over and over. Well, eventually they come upon this one guy, it turns out, that they want, and love gets in the way for one of them between pulling the con they want and finding the love they need, while Ray Liotta's character in this movie actually comes back as one of the previous victims in the line of cons this mother-daughter team is pulled on, mother-daughter team is conned, and he actually wants to get her back. He actually wants Sigourney Weaver's character back. This movie is a really good comedy overall, and the romantic moments in it are done just right and played well enough that it actually makes sense. It's where everything all works together. And again, I highly recommend this one for Jennifer Love Hewitt's acting alone and the way her and Sigourney Weaver play off of each other. Number 10, from 1986, Pretty in Pink. This one is another film to feature the Brat Pack, as they were called, Andrew McCarthy and Molly Ringwald, as two different classes, as two people from different class rankings, or social status, I guess would be a better way of saying it. And is about how their friends disagree and even try to drive them apart, and how their own insecurities can also get in the way. And the thing about this movie, a lot of people don't realize, is that John Cryer, who was on 2.5 Men as Alan, Lex on the latest version of the Supergirl series, was in this movie as Ducky, the best friend of Molly Ringwald, who's the lovelorn type, secretly in love with the best friend, and is going unnoticed by her. Another one that many people don't recommend, and one major one that many people didn't recognize in this movie, which was interesting, is that Kristy Swanson. And it might be Kirsty Swanson, I'm not sure. It's one of the two ways, either Kristy or Kirsty. I'm sorry for getting your name wrong. But she's in this movie, and if you check the credits, she's listed as a Duckette, as basically being the female version of Ducky in a lot of ways in this movie. Swanson would later go on to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie with the late Luke Perry, and which would be the basis for the Sarah Michelle Gellar series that got really famous. Number 9, another really good comedy I recommend just because of the comedy alone makes it great, but the romantic version, the romance that gets added into this makes it a little interesting, and that's Mannequin from 1987, starring Andrew McCarthy, Kim Cattrall, who a lot of people would, in more recent times, would remember for the Sex and the City movies and series, but I remember for this movie specifically as the character of Emmy, a princess from ancient Egypt that ends up getting moved through time after she asks for it, after praying to the gods to escape a marriage she didn't want. God's granted her wish, and she ends up moving through time, testing out different areas till she comes to the 1980s, where she comes to life in the form of this mannequin. Well, the mannequin was created by a guy by Andrew McCarthy's character, who has all this trouble in his life at keeping a job because he wants to be an artist, and it turns out his work is actually taking up too much time and it doesn't fit. So he keeps getting fired and replaced from one job to the next until he runs into this mannequin he created at the very beginning of the movie. And at one point, the mannequin comes to life thanks to the spirit of Emmy. Well, at first, a lot of times, throughout the film, it turns out that nobody else can actually see this mannequin when she's in her live form, her live human form. Anytime they see her, she's just a regular mannequin. But when it's just him and her, she comes alive. So it brings up the question of, is he actually crazy, or is this really going on? James Spader also starred in this movie as one of the main antagonists to it, and many would remember him from the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the voice of Ultron in Avengers: Age of Ultron. G.W. Bailey plays another type of cop in this film, whereas most remember him as being in the Police Academy movies as the guy who wanted to, in the first one, flunk as many of the students as possible, and ends up stuck with the group throughout almost every movie. And another thing about it, this film, with G.W. Bailey, the Police Academy movies, he actually was in the first one. It also featured Kim Cattrall as one of the cadets. And a major player that's in this movie that tends to go unnoticed, Estelle Getty. Anybody who's seen The Golden Girls would remember her as being the smart mouth, great timing actress of Sophia. Number 8. Now we go back to the classics. The 1960s. 1961, Audrey Hepburn's most famous film, most famous and well-known film, Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's been so long since I've seen this movie, to be honest, and I can't really remember what it was about, but I do remember I enjoyed it from the first moment I saw it. What's interesting about this movie is that Audrey Hepburn had admitted in many interviews that this was one of her toughest roles to play because it went against her actual nature. The character was an extrovert, whereas she was introverted in real life and didn't tend to go around a lot of people that much and be outspoken type. Which goes to show how good of an actress she was, as people bought this and enjoyed the film so much, and it's known as a cult classic also. And another thing about this is that in this movie, Audrey Hepburn's character's name of Holly Golightly is later used in another film, America's Sweethearts, during a scene by Catherine Zeta-Jones's character as the name she uses when she checks into hotels. While this shows that Catherine's character had great taste, it doesn't exactly show that she was really that smart in being low-key type personality, because she chose a name that would stick out among all. Meaning, making it seem like she cared more for the attention and didn't care that she could get caught. Number 7, from 1987, Cant Buy Me Love. About a boy who makes a deal with a popular girl, where he'll help pay to get this jacket she got ruined fixed in exchange for her helping to make him popular and pretending to be his girlfriend. The movie stars Patrick Dempsey and Amanda Peterson. While this is, as far as I can tell, the only thing that Amanda Peterson is really known for, despite actually having a list of acting credits, this would not be the last romantic comedy that Patrick Dempsey did, or be a main character in the process of the movie. Another thing about this movie that people don't realize is that the original title for it was Boy Rents Girl. But because Hollywood thought it sounded wrong and sent the wrong message, they went through a list of other names, eventually settling on the title Cant Buy Me Love, which was named after the Beatles song of the same title. But one of those titles that they had in mind actually did later, when the film was remade in 2003, starring Nick Cannon, Christina Milian, and Steve Harvey. The film got another name. Got one of its previous choices as its name. The remake was called Love Don't Cost a Thing. Though it didn't do as well, in my view, as Can't Buy Me Love did, it wasn't bad. But still, Can't Buy Me Love, go with that if you're going to watch either one of them. Number 6, again, speaking of Patrick Dempsey, the film that he did later on, where he played a main character and still was popular, 2002's Sweet Home Alabama, starring Reese Witherspoon, Josh Lewis, and Patrick Dempsey. Where a woman finds out that this man she's in love with wants to marry her. Well, now she's got to go home and face the music of face her past that she's tried to forget all these years, including a husband that she hasn't gotten divorced from, and that she was in love with since she was a child. To me, and another thing that makes this interesting to me is that Reese Witherspoon was born in Louisiana, raised in Tennessee, and in this one, I think she actually does when she's actually doing her acts, I think at times she actually does show her real accent, rather than what Hollywood would have expected from it. That we usually get to see when they fake the accents in the movies. Also, playing Patrick Dempsey's mother in this movie is Candice Bergen, who a lot of people would remember from the show Murphy Brown that ran from 88 to 98, and they tried to revive in recent years. I think it was 2018 when they actually tried to revive it, and it's failed. Because unlike its prior one. This one had a different way of going about it, and it ruined it in the way that it did, in my view. But again, Sweet Home Alabama as a romantic comedy is a great choice. A lot of the scenes are well played to the comedy point, but when it has its romantic moments, it doesn't try to go overboard on it and keeps them nice and evened out. Number 5, from 1985, Better Off Dead, starring John Cusack as a guy who gets dumped by his girlfriend in favor of the more popular guy. And John's character in this movie doesn't take it well and actually goes through almost every way possible to try and kill himself. And yet, somehow humorously screws it up and causes you to laugh at every time he makes the mistake or every time he does have a screw up. And, like, one scene in this, his little brother reads this book that says how to pick up trashy women when John goes to a dance with his best friend because he has nobody. And there he actually ends up meeting the girl who becomes his love interest, who's also living with his neighbors. Well, during that scene, when they actually are in the process of meeting, and at this dance, singer, then Elizabeth Daily, who later went on to do the show Friends for an episode, as Lisa Kudrow's character, Phoebe Buffay's former friend, actually is in this movie. And I also did Alvin and the Chipmunk movies, the cartoon ones, for the singing, and at least one, the Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolf Man. But anyways, in this movie, when she performs 2 songs at this dance: One Way Love, also known as Better Off Dead, and A Little Luck. Like I said, during this area, John's character meets the love interest that causes him to question whether the previous girl was actually worth it as much, or if this new girl truly is the one he should be interested in. And another thing about this movie, it stars the best friend of John Cusack in this movie. The character is played by Curtis Armstrong. You Supernatural fans would know him as the angel Metatron, the guy who wanted to cast all the souls out of heaven, only to realize he ended up making a mistake and wrote God's biography even in it. If you don't want to call him God, just go with Chuck, as that's what the guy actually preferred for some reason. But again, Curtis Armstrong, who played Metatron in that, before he did this movie, and long before Supernatural, he was in another movie franchise known as Revenge of the Nerds, where he played a character called Booger, who was really big on drinking alcohol, had a thing for swearing, but was overall a good character. In this one, you actually see his character somewhat reflective of that, in that he actually snorts snow through a straw like it was cocaine, and talks about how it's fresh now and what the street value of it would be. But again, the movie itself, with the story of, was one girl really worth this guy's life, or is it possible that a new love could blossom, is actually well played, and the story overall has a nice arc and a good way of doing the ending, so that everything's wrapped up. Okay, number 4, 2001's America's Sweethearts, starring Julia Roberts, Catherine Zeta-Jones, John Cusack, and Billy Crystal, where they have this couple, this former couple who is trying to save both their careers, and so they agree to do this press junket where they're going to view the new film. Julia Roberts in this movie plays the older sister to Catherine Zeta-Jones' character and works as her PA, and is in love with John Cusack, and John Cusack's character was actually in this movie the ex to Catherine Zeta-Jones' character and had a mental breakdown. And in the movie, it even shows this, that he, before they do the press junket and anything else in the story, when it shows this, he actually almost runs her over. He actually almost runs through a restaurant on a motorcycle. And because of this, the two split. I mean, Catherine's character got a split between them. And then started, but the reason why he drove it through and had this momentary break from reality is because he caught Catherine Zeta-Jones' character, who was supposed to be his lover, with having a meal with another guy who ends up, at the beginning of the film, turns out is living with her now and is her current lover. And John, throughout this movie, is trying everything he can to get his ex back, but then comes to question, is she actually worth it, or could it be that there's actually a better person for him? One thing I enjoyed about this film, other than the obvious romantic triangle that seems to be almost a stereotype to the romantic comedies lately, to the romantic comedies, is that it also showed how these people dealt with their lives, and how sometimes what may have seemed best was a bad idea, and how Hollywood stereotypes can be portrayed and played the same way, such as Billy Crystal's character in this movie, who's supposed to be helping to promote this film in order to save their careers, and his character is a best friend to John Cusack's in a way, and actually considers him a real close friend. But at the beginning, his character was actually fired, and Seth Green's character is brought in and going to replace him until they realize Billy Crystal's character is going to be the one they need to do this promotion in order to get everybody together and get them to survive this and help save the studio. Well, when this happens, he takes Seth on as an understudy, basically, and shows him, and at one point when they release the footage, they release a video that paints John Cusack's character in a bad way at one point, and Seth's character asks him if he liked John's character. Billy goes, yeah, he's a good man, my best friend, love him. And Seth says, but you released the tape. If you care, why would you do that? He goes, say your mother died, hit by a car. Well, while you're here, while you're the best friend, even no matter how much you love the person, you're here to promote this film. That's what you're here for. That's all that matters. He goes, you walk out, shed a tear, say, it's so tragic because she would have loved this movie. And throughout this movie, it shows Billy Crystal setting up stunts at some point, in some way, to help get coverage for this film. And whether it benefits or actually makes John Cusack, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Julia Roberts' characters look crazy or normal in any way, it just plays around this. And the movie also stars Christopher Walken as a director of a film that they're trying to sell, that nobody's actually seen. And it's done, like I said, this movie does a lot more with the comedy than the romance, but it actually plays well enough that while it favors the comedy, it hits the romantic notes just right to play off of it. Number 3, from 1987, Some Kind of Wonderful, starring Eric Stoltz, who people would remember as Rocky Dennis in the movie Mask, and from the movie from the 90s, 1995, the movie Prophecy, with Christopher Walken, where Walken played the angel Gabriel, who at this time had become a sort of fallen angel and wanted to get rid of humanity. Whereas Eric Stoltz's character wanted to save him and played the character of Simon as a minor role. When the movie's Some Kind of Wonderful, Eric Stoltz's character gets involved in a love triangle of sorts. Only he isn't aware he's in one. He's got the best friend who loves him, and he's in love with Leah Thompson's character. The best friend is played by Mary Stuart Masterson. Leah Thompson, many of you will remember, Back to the Future series, Lorraine McFly. She was also on an episode of Tales from the Crypt called Only Sin Deep, where it's about a woman who's so vain, and it ends up showing what happens when you let vanity control you and the price that can be paid for it. Well, as I said, with back to the Some Kind of Wonderful, you got this love triangle in a way, and Leah Thompson's character is known for hanging out with the popular guys, having this good life, and seen as not being true to herself. Eric Stoltz is in love with her. He's even painted this painting of her that looks wonderful in the way it's done. And through the movie, the boyfriend to Leah Thompson ends up screwing up and causing a breakup between them. And she agrees to a date with Eric Stoltz. And this leads to people not being happy, because the idea that she would go from somebody that's of a higher social status to dating the mechanic was seen as insulting. And another interesting note about this is that the person who plays the boyfriend, who's really mad about this, that she would choose somebody else over him, and just thinks he's that great, is Craig Sheffer, who, I'm probably saying his last name wrong, by the way. If you saw One Tree Hill, the character of Keith Scott is played by this guy. He went from being the antagonist in this movie to being key, showing this man had a great acting career on his own, but also that he could play both sides of the coin, and it was done well, of the acting coin, and he did it well. And a minor character in this movie, Elias Koteas, I think that's how you say his name. Most would remember him for being Casey Jones in the live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from the 90s. And also, another thing that makes this one interesting, he was also in The Prophecy, whereas in this movie, Eric Stoltz had the lead. In The Prophecy, he actually has the lead, and Eric Stoltz, as stated earlier, plays Simon, but has a minor role in the movie of The Prophecy. Number 2 in this series, in this list, 1998. It's another Reese Witherspoon movie, but it's the one I think was her best film that she did. Man, she's done. Her and Paul Rudd in the movie Overnight Delivery. In this movie, a guy finds out that his girlfriend is cheating on him, so he decides to break up with her by sending her a letter. And he gets Reese Witherspoon's character, who works as an exotic dancer, stripper, however you want to phrase it, to work her way through college to help him. I mean, she decides to help him. She gets a photo with her half naked in it, and sends it along with a letter that's very insulting to the ex, well, soon to be ex, and a used condom, which she had a smoker hook up the worst thing he could into it, and decides to send this to him. Send this to her, and the ultimate way to make her pay, the ultimate way to get revenge, is that after doing all this to send the stuff to her, because they're going to send it through overnight delivery through what's on there is Global Express, which I'm guessing was supposed to be a play on FedEx at the time. Actually, they signed the form to have the recipient pay for it upon delivery. Well, the guy wakes up the next morning and finds out that what he thought was cheating was actually his girlfriend was supposed to be walking a dog she was stuck with for a friend who went to spend the weekend with her boyfriend. And now it's up to him and Reese Witherspoon's character to actually try and stop this package from making it to its destination in hopes of saving his relationship. This movie gets interesting because it's one of those absurd comedies, but it's got a great romantic story to it. A couple of guest spots in this movie that people may not notice at the time, people may not have noticed real recently, is Sarah Silverman's in this movie as a classmate to Paul Rudd's character, and the guy who played Jigsaw in the first 3 Saws, at least, is in this movie as a guy known as J.D. John Dwight Killer Beasley, who was known as a serial killer who he admits in this movie, him and his most recent love interest had a fight over him opening the door 1 second early on the microwave. Well, one day she actually gets mad at him and closes the door back. He cuts her head off and nukes it in the microwave. Now, from this, I could see why they picked him to play Saw, because he actually plays this role so well. So him as the Jigsaw killer, as Jigsaw, actually makes sense. Okay, but like I said, with romantic comedy wise, Overnight Delivery, number 2 on the list, and there's only one film I can think that makes it better, which is why it's my number 1. And it stars a Hepburn, but it's not Audrey. It's 1938's Bringing Up Baby. It stars Katharine Hepburn and an early Cary Grant long before he did Singing in the Rain. This, to me, was one of the earliest films that showed how a short time can change relationships and how somebody feels about people, but also how older traditions focused on a person's career rather than focusing on the idea of finding happiness and actually being happy. One of the writers for this, and like I said, this featured Cary Grant. But anyways, the idea of this story is that a paleontologist is getting the last piece of his statue. Well, at the same time, he's supposed to be getting married to this woman who's of a high class. Well, while he's thinking of going on a honeymoon with her, and after they get married and being happy, the fiancé is actually telling him that there will be no time for that his career must come first, and that he must come back to work right after the wedding. No honeymoon, no nothing. poor guy, and that he's going to have to deal with that the marriage is secondary, that the career must come first. And in this, he's told that he needs to get this woman, he needs to go talk to this lawyer who represents this very important client to the science department, who's offering up a lot of money, but wants him to speak to him on behalf, but wants somebody to come speak to him about continuing the donations. So they send him, and throughout this film, he runs into this girl, played by Katharine Hepburn, and at every turn, something goes wrong. It goes from one good moment to one bad moment very quickly and gets all messed up in many ways. And it's just one of those series of unfortunate events type deals. Not like Lemony Snicket, but more just series of unfortunate events where it's comedy of errors type situation. But anyways, at one point there's this tiger that she's got, or leopard, I can't remember exactly which. But anyways, she's got this exotic animal from overseas that's been sent to her by by a family member. Well, the idea is that she's supposed to take this animal to her aunt, who happens to be the nice little beneficiary that Cary Grant's character needs to talk to, that's doing these donations. Well, she likes this guy, but she doesn't want to admit it, so she acts like the animal attacked her, and when he comes to help her, she ends up showing that she played him. He gets a little angry. Well, this animal starts following him down the street, and in order to fix things, in order to get her to leave him alone, he has to agree to take the trip with her to take this animal up to her aunt's. And again, this film shows how, in a short amount of time, so much can change, and even how old traditions were, and how messed up they could be. And I loved it because I couldn't stop laughing because of the way it was done. It was done so well. And the romantic moments in this aren't overly done, where it's like, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. Oh, how stereotypical. No, it's actually done in a way that it flows nicely, and you're like, oh, that's sweet. Type deal. One interesting fact I found about this movie is that the writer and one of the two screenplay adapters of this movie, and again, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Hagar Wild, was a female writer who wrote in Hollywood in the late 30s to the late 50s. What's interesting about this, besides her being a female writer during that time period, when Hollywood was known to be a male-dominated profession, is that she wrote for both Hollywood films and the television shows out there. Meaning that she's, to me, one of the earliest examples of Hollywood's great writers. Great writers and proof that women could do anything. So in the comments, leave your favorite romantic comedy, or even your list of romantic comedies that you enjoy, as well as what you think I should do for my next video. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking like this, where I'm the one making up the videos. Have fun, and I look forward to your suggestions, as well as doing my next film for you. Or my next video, I mean.